Well, welcome in. We're talking conference realignment, but it doesn't totally apply to us. I mean, I guess Calabrese, you're getting the call up. You're the big winner in all this, getting the call from Group of Five up to talking Power Five, biggest programs. I'm Tim Kalinowski. You're Mike Calabrese. We're talking player props, season-long player props. How pumped are you? I mean, you're probably a little frustrated that we don't have some of those ugly teams, ugly conferences, because you have your player prop fantasy league, and that is the weeds you get into, Calabrese. So this should be easy pickings for you.
Yeah, I'm going full Tyrone Bigsby. It's like, you got any Malik Hornsby Texas State numbers that I can hit? This is fine. I understand that they just want to put the biggest players, the biggest programs here in the prop market. I'll take it because honestly, with so few states allowing it, the fact that it's out there for DraftKings, that it's out there for Prize Picks, there's major markets being built up. That's exciting for what we're trying to do here. And just as a byproduct of being in the weeds and looking at so many, team previews, the BBOC team, we, put a preview out for all 133 FBS teams. We have strong takes. We got hot takes on just about every single player. And there's a lot of value here and a lot of mispriced numbers. So let's go ahead and get at it.
Yeah, let's do it. And at the very least, if you're not going to bet these numbers, we're giving you a little bit of insight on how your program's going to do, because they offer these numbers on the most important players on the biggest programs in the country. So depending on what we think here, it's kind of a little bit of a snapshot of how we think your year could go, depending on where your college football fandom lies. And you're going to go right into my college football fandom and Clemson with your first pick here.
Yeah, I mean, the highlight so far of the Clemson offseason, in my opinion, is Dabo jumping off of a rock with his team doing some cliff jumping, although he was wearing a life jacket. What happened to the days of bring your own guts? But that's separate. Let's not talk about Dabo. Let's talk about another coach on his staff. Garrett Riley comes in as the OC from TCU, arguably the best hire in all of college football in the offseason. He's the one who's going to give this offense a shot in the arm, and he's not starting from scratch. He starts with Cade Klubnik, a five-star kid who looked very good at the end of last year. He averaged 300 yards per game in games that he started, which is why I went ahead and circled that number just above 3,000 yards in the market in terms of his passing total for this season. And just a reminder to the audience, that accounts for all 12 regular season games. You're not getting the bump from the ACC title game. You're certainly not getting anything from the bowl game. So you have to focus in on those 12 games. And what I find to be interesting is I think this is mispriced by about 300, 400 yards, which is significant. That's, close to a 10% differential in where I think this should land. Because when you look at what Riley did last year with TCU, in the fall, they name Chandler Morris as their starting quarterback. He gets hurt in the opener against Colorado. Max Duggan comes in more known for his legs than his arm throughout his career, and he turns him into a Heisman runner-up. Like, that's an incredible job with a quarterback who had a little bit of issues with his downfield passing game, not in the Riley system. So I think this is going to be a huge year for Cade Klubnik and really a huge year for Clemson in terms of a bounce back. And then finally, just like, what does he have to work with on the perimeter? There was a lot being made last year of DJU's issues with the offense, and they didn't have the players on the perimeter to stretch the field. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think Bo Collins and Antonio Williams are going to have big years as well. So you can go ahead and potentially look at them for overs on their yardage as well.
Well, that makes me feel good. I guess you're telling me that Garrett Riley, you would even play my over passing yards if I was in the Garrett Riley system. It sounds like he can make anybody good. And again, with someone like Cade, that makes me feel really good. I'm hoping they lean more Cade, but I do worry just a tad about Dabo. Seems really excited about their running backs as well, Shipley, Maffa. So I guess, Riley ran the ball a lot in TCU as well, and Duggan still got all of his passing yards. So that doesn't steer you anywhere off of that at all, or no?
Well, I do think it comes down to game flow to a certain degree, and I think you're going to need some of these ACC also ran teams to make sure that they're giving Clemson their best, so that's not a third and fourth quarter situation where he's turned around just giving it to Shipley. Because to your point, Riley turned Kendre Miller into a star at TCU as well. He had 17 total touchdowns last year, so Shipley is probably on deck for a big year as well. I'm just looking for those games so Duke's a good example in the opener. I want Duke to give them a 4-quarter battle. That way, Klubnik is still throwing the ball in the fourth quarter, because you really need him to explode in those big games, get to the 300, 400 yard threshold. So you can kind of weather those games when he only throws the ball 25 times because they're, beating the stuffing out of these ACC teams.
Yeah, I like that. Riley comes in, everybody eats. I'm going to go with my top play. Look, it hurts me to do this because last year I was all in on Rocky Top, Rocky Top, Rocky Top. I called it in the offseason. I said, I can't wait to bet Tennessee money line against Alabama. I loved that team. I had their over win total. I had them every which way. Hendon Hooker, Heisman prop. But look, no matter what the number this year, Tennessee's win total, everywhere you look, 2023 Tennessee is getting 2023 Tennessee is getting 2022 Tennessee treatment. And that's all the way from Milton getting Hendon Hooker treatment. And I'm sorry, Hendon Hooker, wait a minute. Hendon Hooker beat out Joe Milton for the job twice. Last year, Hooker threw for 1,300 yards. And we all know he got hurt in the South Carolina game and he missed the final game against Vanderbilt. So let's just call it, say, 3,400 yards he would have ended up with. Milton shouldn't be anywhere in that neighborhood. Jalen Hyatt ain't walking through that door. And my favorite part of this is that Heupel has shown he's got no problem benching Joe Milton. Their backup quarterback, he's a stud. You know, one of the top quarterbacks, top prospects in America, all that, breathing down Joe Milton's neck. I don't trust Joe Milton as far as I can throw him.
Well, we're pros here at the Action Network, so we clearly know how to pronounce Nico Iamaleava's name, and everyone should probably, work the next couple of weeks to get that down, because there's a good chance that he's going to be playing by October. So, Colin Wilson at the BBOC has been calling for that. He thinks he's a better fit for this offense. And Joe Milton's the kind of guy who can absolutely blow you out of the water with his arm talent, but he's scattershot. Like, just because he had a good bowl game against Clemson does not mean he's overall consistent in terms of his accuracy. And if he has a game where he only hits 50% of his passes and Tennessee either is upset or they have some issues where, there's a confidence question, I could see them bringing in the 5-star freshman. Like, when you look at their schedule too, like they play a team like UTSA, you talked about the G5 ranks. UTSA is going to score a lot of points in that game. So Tennessee, to win games like that, are going to have to score 30, 40 points. So it's not like he can just kind of roll in and, have the training wheels on. He needs to be ready to go right away. And I agree, with an opportunity to get him benched, that's an winner right there. So that's all you need is for him to get, the hook from Heupel.
Yeah. So I'm looking at under Milton, and the number that I see here is 3,100.5 under Milton. Next.
All right, let's go and stay in the ACC. I started with Klubnik. Let's go Trey Benson at Florida State. Number one, when it comes to running back props, I do not like the crowded running back rooms, the dreaded running back by committee. Trayshawn Ward transfers out. He's a K-State looking to, be maybe the leader in rushing in the Big 12. That's great. Got him out of the picture. So now with Benson, somebody who is red hot at the end of the regular season, his last 5 games, he ran for 593 yards. That's a taste of how much they've invested in him in terms of touches, but also that he can pop the big play. Alex Adkins, their offensive coordinator, clearly favors the rush. They run more than they pass. Jordan Travis is a guy who is going to run some of the RPO read option kind of stuff. So I see him getting, in terms of Benson, 15 to 20 carries per game. And I think when you project that out for the season, he's going to absolutely blast through that 1,000-yard threshold. And that's where it is in the market right now. I am closer to 1,200, 1,300 yards. So once again, I think there's a real mispriced opportunity to go in here and to grab a guy who, from a game flow perspective, should be salting games away in the third and fourth quarter. So I think there's an opportunity for the Seminoles to really lay it on a lot of teams outside of their games with, LSU in the opener. They're going to be big favorites in a lot. And I love that in terms of, Benson getting over this number. A shout out to the CFF guys, Joe Da Silva, Mike Bainbridge. They go through with player projections. They got him at 1,200 yards for the season as well. So I have some good company in terms of this over. What do you think about Florida State this year? In general, I know it's the arch rivalry with Clemson in the ACC.
I'll tell you what, I'm terrified of Florida State. And I think the best part of this play is that Travis is getting all of the love. And so it's a rare, find by you where you can take a team that's getting a lot of hype and find a spot to say, oh, where can I still find an underpriced over, on a team, like I said, that's getting a ton of love. And I think that's a lot of that is going to Travis, and rightfully so. But for you to pick out, hey, this running back room ain't crowded anymore, let's look here instead of, at the big dog Travis. I like that a lot. I'm terrified of Florida State. That game, September 23rd, I'm not going to sleep that entire week. I really am terrified. I think Florida State, they could lose because now the new ACC rules with no divisions, they could lose a couple games and still win the ACC and get into the playoff. So I'm terrified of Florida State.
Now, pre-recording, you name dropped one of my favorite quarterbacks in the country out on the West Coast, but you didn't say if you're going over or under. So I'm interested in what you think about Michael Pennix Jr.
Michael Pennix Jr., that's my second play. How could you play an under on this guy? I have over 3,750 passing yards for Michael Pennix. Like, I'm sorry, I feel like a square here. Everyone's talking about Pennix, like, oh, this could be a Heisman guy, but I mean, he might throw for 1 billion yards this year. Like last year, he threw for 4,300, and everybody's back, at least on the outside. So I'm saying 3,700. Yeah, over. He might hit this by October. And I'm also interested in looking at his passing TDs. I think that number's 30.5. He had 31, I think, last year. So like, he's getting, it seems to me, not enough love in the player prop market, which is a little bizarre.
Yeah, Kalen DeBoer, to shoot back to the G5 days, when he was at Fresno State, his quarterbacks put up huge numbers. Jake Haener became kind of a cult hero there in West Coast football. So he's just doing it again up at the Power 5 level. I agree with you on the yardage. The touchdowns always worry me just because, there's always the potential the guy gets pushed out of the 1 yard line, like 30, 35 in that range. That's a lot of TDs. So he could throw a ton and you still lose that bet. But the yardage one, like, he's a guy who legitimately can throw for 500 yards in a game. So you can get big chunks out of this total for the season and get them, in single games. And their opener, what I like is they're playing somebody challenging. They don't just have a cream puff non-conference schedule where he gets pulled. They're playing Boise right out of the gate. And I think that could be a game that ends up being more high scoring than a lot of analysts are calling for, because Boise's offense really got going at the end of last year with Talon Green, a quarterback who the Air Force coach called a Vince Young clone. So for your purposes, a huge shootout where he stays in for, all 60 minutes and throws for 400 yards against Boise would be a great start to this prop.
Yeah, my biggest trepidation here is his health. But at the same time, they're supposed to have a special year. And I think he's going to do anything he can to stay on the field. This is supposed to be a special season for Washington. And, it's fun to root for that offense and root for points. So at the very least, I'm happy to have an investment in that offense. And we'll move now. SEC. Mike, what do you got in the SEC?
All right, Malik Nabers, anyone who watched the last 2 games, the SEC title game, the bowl game, he blew up, had huge numbers, had an instant connection with Garrett Nussmeier, the backup quarterback, who may end up leading some series this fall. We'll see how they integrate him with Daniels. But in general, there's a reason why this guy was named first team all SEC in the preseason. He is an explosive player after he catches the football. And when I look at the number, I had it in my head for the touchdowns. I was like, this has got to be close to 8 or 9. And at that point, it would be a pass. 6.5. And here's the thing about Brian Kelly's system. I like to look at, as much data as possible. And when you look at his last 3 years at Notre Dame and you remove the COVID year because it was a wacky season and teams were playing the even number of games. So let's throw that out. The last 3 years in South Bend, his number 1 wide receiver always scored 9 or more touchdowns. So I look at Nabers at 6.5. I think he's going to have every opportunity to exceed this number. And he's somebody that isn't dependent on game flow in the same way that maybe a Johnny Wilson from Florida State, where he's a red zone target, where it's like you need to get to the red zone, not have a rushing touchdown, and then throw him a jump ball. Nabers is somebody you can throw him the ball on your own 30 and he goes for a 70-yard touchdown. So I love the opportunity to take over on a very low touchdown total for an offense that should be dynamic. And if there is a situation where Nussmeier plays a little bit, that's great because the connection is perfect. So even when you get into the variables of like, does a quarterback get hurt? Do they play musical chairs? All of it benefits Nabers. And that's why I'm on him to go over 6.5.
I love it. Yeah. LSU, another kind of a darling, and to find a spot again that doesn't have to do totally reliant on the quarterback. This guy could house it from, his own 1 yard line. That is something, it's a great find, because the thing about these props, right? They only offered the big names, big schools, and to still find overvalue, I think is pretty good. I'll ask you one question before we head out here. You were given 3, I was given 2. I was hung up on Sam Hartman. His over under passing yards was 2,900. And I'm sitting here and I'm just like, he threw for 1 billion at Wake Forest. But it's not that mesh scheme at Notre Dame. So I didn't play it. That was like my fringe third. I was trying to go under, but it wasn't high enough for me. Give me a little insight on Hartman at Notre Dame, if you could.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you're seeing it properly because the claw fence is not coming with him from Winston-Salem to South Bend. So that's for starters. Like Dave Clawson made him and basically every quarterback that he's worked with into a superstar. Like Jamie Newman was right there and he looked like he was going to transfer to Georgia and then he fell off the face of the earth. Like that's how good of a quarterback whisperer Clawson is. Now you go to Notre Dame, who are their wide receivers? Like they don't have any options there where they have Estime in the backfield and a good offensive line. I think they're going to be running a lot. I think they're going to be relying on a stingy defense, and they don't need him to play hero ball, which he had to multiple times at Wake Forest. You know, we're throwing around game flow pretty liberally here on the show, but man, Wake Forest was up against it in so many games in the ACC. So he had a bomb away with 40, 45 pass attempts. That's just not going to happen with, Notre Dame this year. And a lot of these props, it's about opportunity first. And I just don't see him having the opportunity to eclipse these kind of numbers. So it may seem short in terms of the overall passing total given his career statistics, but this is totally different. This is a new ball game and a new OC at Notre Dame. This is year one. This is not Tommy Rees. So a lot of unknowns. I think the only way you can play this is under.
All right, I like it. So you're taking me to school here. I'm newer to the player prop market in college football. You know this thing like the back of your hand. You're a great follow on Twitter, great follow in the Action app. So make sure you're following Calabrese. I'm Tim Kanowski. Follow me on Twitter and the Action app as well. Excited to do this for the rest of the season every week. It'll make you a sharper college football fan as well, regardless of if you're playing these. So any parting words, Calabrese, before we head out of here?
I think it's always a great idea to be invested in college player props because you're looking for markets that the books don't put as much homework into. NFL lines are so well calibrated. The margin of error, you'll listen to some of our great talent here at the Action Network. They'll talk about a number that they like for passing or rushing. At 62, I like it. At 60 and a half, I hate it. It's like, that's how tight we're talking. You could drive a truck through some of these mispriced college player props, and we're going to be on it all season long, giving you the best ones every single week.
I love it. I'm pumped to do it. And again, you just sound smarter with your friends when you're throwing around college football player props and naming names no one's ever heard of. I love it. I love it. So that's a wrap. We're looking forward rest of the season. It's almost coming. It's almost coming. Thanks, Calabrese.
See ya.